Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Crimson Chronicles Podcast. I'm Rick Morton and excited to be back with you for another edition of the Crimson Chronicles Podcast. I'm excited to be really back with actually a voice, and so that I don't play the role of Silent Bob on tonight's edition like I did last week. But really, Tommy, we're looking forward to this week. Have a Crimson Tide legend and somebody that we are hosting into our living rooms probably several times a week right now.
Yeah. Well, Richard Hendrix is was a great player at Alabama, one of my favorites of all time. From Athens, Alabama, he was Mr. Basketball in Alabama. During his senior season at Athens, he averaged 22.7 points and 15 rebounds and 6 blocks per game. He set a state record in career rebounds at 1,820 and in block shots with 667. Now, for the record, according to the Alabama High School Athletic Association, Trendon Watford from Mountain Brook and Shades Valley broke his rebounding record in 19. However, we think that Trendon may have included his 8th grade year in those statistics. But so if that were the case, Richard still holds the record. He scored 2,915 points in his 4 seasons at Athens. He's a 2005 McDonald's All-American. He played in the 2005 Michael Jordan All-American All-Star Game in Madison Square Garden. He's a 2004 and 2005 Parade All-American, and we'll get into more detail later about his career at Alabama. But last year he was honored as Alabama's SEC legend, and also last year he was inducted into the Limestone County Athletic Sport Hall of Fame. So congratulations, Richard. It's great to have you today.
Thank you all so much for having me. And I like to think that maybe since I finished on tops with the rebounds, maybe I can still say that I claim the record. But
yeah,
hey, good company
to
share it with. If Trendon Watford is a really good player, so
yeah.
I like to look at who can hold a rebounding record. I say if it's a free throw block out and we're blocking out 1-on-1, who do you think's going to get it? That's what I kind of like to go with.
I hear you. You're going to get it.
We're going with you, man.
Yeah. Well, Richard, before we start talking about your growing up days in Athens, I want to talk about your father, Bernard. He was your high school coach, but Bernard Hendrix is from Gadsden, Alabama, and I watched him play at Gadsden High School. I was about 3 years behind him. We were never in school together, but he was a fantastic player at Gadsden High and could jump out of the gym. They say, the rumors were, some 50-something years ago, that he could pick a quarter off the top of the backboard. I don't know if that's true or not, but I'm telling you, he was, during Christmas break in Gadsden, they used to have like a tournament of champions, and the best 8 teams in the state in the top classification, which then was 4A, would come to Gadsden and have a great Christmas tournament. And I mean, we're talking Parker, Carver, Montgomery, Shades Valley, Lee of Huntsville, Educator. And I was in middle school then, but I would go to that tournament. And I remember seeing the great Alan Murphy from Parker and Condredge Holloway from Lee of Huntsville. And your dad was right up there among them. And then I didn't go to the 71 state tournament, which was held at Memorial Coliseum. But I know Gadsden High finished 3rd in the state that year, and your dad made the first team All-State that year. And then he went to, I think, Athens College, led the NAIA in blocks. And now I know where you get your blocking ability from, and made first team All-Conference. He was an assistant at Athens High for a while, and then became head coach, and it was actually your coach. And then as if that wasn't enough, he coached tennis at Athens High School from 85 to 2013, where he won 3 state championships. So your dad was a great player. I don't know if he's told you that, or if you've heard that, or if you've seen film on him, but he was really good.
Well, it's always fun. I heard a lot of those stories, and you bringing up a lot of those memories right there. You hear about the Gadsden Tigers when I was growing up as a kid, and those teammates that he had in those tough games. He mentioned playing against Alan Murphy, and his teammate Daryl Dunn was a really good player, the name I always hear. Ricky Brown, who played at Alabama. So they talked about how many good teams that were in the state at that time, and Gadsden High, and the head coach, Gid Riddle. So I've always heard all the stories, how they finished in 3rd place in the state tournament, and they threw the 3rd place trophy in the Coosa River. stopped on the bridge and threw it in the Coosa River in Gadsden, Alabama. So I've always heard about all of those great players. And the one thing, too, in a time period where, where there are so many Division I colleges now, at that particular time, there weren't as many. I think you probably had Alabama and Auburn might have been the only two Division I schools in the state. So you had some really good players who were going to what were considered mid-major schools, Athens College, North Alabama, Montevallo, all of those. So when you hear about players from that era and they play at schools that maybe people don't remember, these would have been Division I caliber players, high major,
Yeah, sure.
at least mid-major, because, you just didn't have as many slots. But I've heard the stories, and he had a tremendous athletic career. And the funny thing is now, the older he gets, I think getting that quarter off the top of the backboard keeps going higher. Now it's like he knocks it off with an elbow.
Careful now, that rebound record may be growing as well. So,
it
has a
is.
tendency to happen.
Absolutely. I think he took $1 off and put 4 quarters up on the top is what I hear. He changed it.
That's nice.
Well, I'm telling you now, he was a great player. And you're right, Darryl Dunn played, and even John Kroll was on that team, back then. But I used to watch him, and man, I loved going up to Gadsden High and watch those games. But he was a heck of a player. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, Richard, I want to know about growing up in a home with a mom and dad, both who were educators, because I'm married to a teacher. I've grown up in the home of a teacher. I kind of know what that, some of what that's like. But what was your experience of having a mom and dad who were pretty serious about education?
Well, I enjoyed my upbringing growing up in Athens, Alabama. I think the biggest thing for me is that everything that we did seemed to be revolving around Athens High School and Athens City Schools. So you grow up, you're sitting in your mother's classroom after school, waiting for her to finish, grading papers before you go home. You're at the practices as a little kid. Every day after school, getting up extra shots. You're the towel boy, the water boy, you're the manager. You ride the buses to games. And you look back on it, and it's such a privilege that you have to be able to have that level of exposure as a young player, to be around, teachers and educators and coaches all over the state. When you're in hospitality rooms or just listening to the coach talk, you're privy to get so much information that just every other kid doesn't get. And that allowed me to advance my game much faster than I think any of my counterparts were able to do. It allowed me to be a better player, particularly with a higher basketball IQ at a young age. The advantage of being in the gym every single day to be able to work on your game and have that type of resource is priceless. And I enjoyed it. And I think it was all a family environment. Me and my sisters were always together in those situations, whether it was me going to them while they were cheering or running track or playing softball or playing soccer. You were always in support of each other, and the same support I felt for them backing me as well.
But, also as a young athlete, you were not only a basketball player. You played soccer, you played tennis, you played baseball, you played football. I really would love to see you play tennis, honestly, because I figure your game at the net has to be pretty tough. The range alone, man, would have to be amazing.
I still play. I'll probably be out there this Sunday. I still play. I mean, I enjoy it. I enjoy all sports. I mean, if something's on TV, I've always had the interest to watch it, to play it, to be competitive. I didn't play in high school. When I got to high school, I narrowed down to only played one sport. I think I came through at a time where specialization started to really take place, where players were not playing multiple sports when you got to the high school level. It's a big regret that I have, because I think in hindsight, I had the athletic ability to be a force, not just in basketball, but in football, baseball, tennis. And I don't think it would have impaired me from, still achieving whatever I wanted in whatever sport that I decided to play. But I've always been a person that's enjoyed competition on all levels, and I still do.
What do you think about the specialization trend? I'm curious, just as somebody who kind of lived through that transition, good or bad, what are your feelings?
Well, in hindsight, I look back and I realize that only a small percentage of us are fortunate enough to be able to take your skills to the professional level. and to be able to take those skills and play for a long period of time. So with that being the case, I get it why people think that they want to put all their eggs in one basket to give themselves a chance, but the numbers don't show that you're going to make it. And I'm not trying to be a dream killer, but it's one of those things where you would be better off, I believe, to enjoy all of the sports, all of the team environments, and from an athletic standpoint and from a sports IQ standpoint, being able to play multiple sports is just better for you as an athlete. I don't think at the ages of 13, 14, and 15, is that really going to impact you as far as you not being able to make it in whatever the sport it is that you choose once you become a college athlete. So I'm not for it. I'm not even for a lot of the extra ball. I think people should play basketball in basketball season. When the basketball season ends, go pick up a baseball bat. When the baseball season ends, go play soccer or football. And when basketball comes back around, you pick up the basketball then. I think you've started to see some negatives in players' bodies when it comes to the repetitive motion of something all year long. You look in the NBA and you see how many players are not even 30 and they're load managing. I mean, it's something that you never heard of in generations before. And I think it's because of the mismanagement of playing one particular sport for an entire lifetime.
Makes sense.
Interesting. Richard, your time as a basketball star at Athens High School was outstanding, just amazing. In addition to the stats I mentioned a little while ago, in your time there, you had 92 career double-doubles, 9 triple-doubles, and 2 quadruple-doubles. And I haven't heard the term quadruple-double in a long time. I assume that's points, rebounds, blocks, and either assists or steals.
Assists. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Assists.
I actually had one of those actually came in Coleman Coliseum. We played a game my senior year against Calera High School, and I had a quadruple double. I mean, so,
Wow.
you know, I've always taken pride in trying to be a complete player and play the total game in hopes to help my team win. So, rebounding, I think with my size, my hand-eye coordination, and strong hands and long arms, it was something that just came natural to me. But I always tried to impact the game in multiple ways.
Well, you were, like we said, a parade All-American, a McDonald's All-American, a national top 5 recruit coming out of Athens in 2005. Tell us about the recruiting process. Did you narrow it down to just a handful of schools, or was Alabama always your top choice?
Well, Alabama was definitely always highly considered. I have a family that has a history of several family members to attend the university. My older sisters had both graduated from Alabama, so I was familiar with the school, and they started to recruit me first. They recruited me my freshman year and started to show a little bit of interest. And after I considered a few more schools, I narrowed it down to Alabama and North Carolina. I just always felt like if I was going to leave the SEC, I was going to go to North Carolina, which is the school that is a favorite for so many nationally, just with the history of the players and the coaches and just the tradition. It was a tough decision because I weighed all of the options. How is this going to impact my future? What kind of legacy did I want at the school? How would I be remembered? And if you remember in that time when I was getting recruited, around 2001, when I was in high school, Alabama goes to an NIT final, 2001. 2002, they're the SEC regular season champs. 2003, they're the number 1 team in the country. And for a short period of time, in 2004, they get to an Elite 8. So when it comes to making my consideration, I knew that the class of 2004 had committed already at the time. I think in that class, it was Ronald Steele. Glenn Miles from West End was signed to come. Jean Felix was the top junior college player in the country. I had another player named Al Weber, who was a really highly coveted player, top 50 player. And then, my class, Yamin Coleman had already committed, who was a friend of mine, played AAU basketball, had been a 5A state champion at Wilcox Central, and Brandon Hollinger was the last one to join us, but Alonzo G was a top 30. And I looked at that roster with Kennedy Winston coming back, Chuck Davis, Jamario Davidson. I felt like I could be the missing piece to kind of help us to get over the top to bring Alabama's first Final Four. Now, unfortunately, in that if you compare that at the same time, North Carolina was not the North Carolina that they turned out to be. Roy Williams had just come over, and he was starting to build something. But the thing for me that was difficult, I guess, to swallow is that once I signed and came to the university, North Carolina wins the national championship in my senior year in high school. And Alabama, we were riddled with injuries and didn't have players to be able to be on the court as we expected. Maybe they turned pro or whatnot. But we had a lot of things that really changed the trajectory of what I would have loved for it to be. But nonetheless, I enjoyed my time at the university. I felt like I gave it my all as a player. Statistically, I think I was a strong player, but we didn't have the winning impact that I desired and had wished for.
Well, is it true that you played online chess with one assistant coach named Philip Pearson, maybe?
I did. And, he always tells that story to this day. That's one of his favorite stories in recruiting, that I think I was a junior in high school and we played late into the night, playing chess online. I can't remember who won. I like to think that I won, but either way it went, it was highly competitive. I mean, it was up awesome. Late on a school night, but that just shows you a little bit of my personality. A lot of people, they really just are basketball players, but I've always enjoyed doing so many things, if it's chess or doing puzzles or building stuff with DIY projects. That's just my style. It's not just basketball, but that was something that I really enjoyed that Coach Pearson did. And it played a role in me coming to the university.
That's awesome. And nor did it count as one of those weekly calls that he could make.
That's right.
Exactly. So, you just put up a different screen name on that one. I don't know who I was just playing, someone on the internet.
Well, you mentioned your time in Alabama. Let's get into your 3 years there. Your freshman season, 05-06. Of course, this was under Mark Gottfried, who we had on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. He was great. That year, Alabama finished 18-13. 10-6 in the SEC, very good record. Lost to UCLA in the second round of the NCAA tournament. You averaged, as a freshman, 9.4 points and 8 rebounds a game. You finished second in the SEC in rebounding in SEC games with 9.3 per game. You made the 2006 SEC Coaches Freshman All-SEC team, and you were a Rivals.com freshman All-American. The starters that season, and you mentioned some of those guys, were you, Ronald Steele, Brandon Hollinger, Jamario Davidson, and Evan Brock, and Alonzo G. and John Felix were the top two reserves. How was that transition between Athens High School and the University of Alabama, not just talent-wise, but in everything, strength and conditioning, program, and all that? How was that transition?
Well, you can start right there, because that was the toughest thing that I'd ever had to deal with in my life when I first stepped on campus, with the strength and conditioning. I mean, you come down into Tuscaloosa heat, and I tell you, it's a little different heat in Tuscaloosa than it is in North Alabama. People might tell you differently, but it just is a little bit different. And, I don't miss those days of running out on the track or on the football field or the weights room sessions. But I will tell you this, those things made me stronger mentally. Obviously, they made you stronger physically, but they definitely being pushed to the level that you don't know that you can achieve has been something that stayed with me for the rest of my life. You're challenged, you don't know how hard you can go, and someone pushes you to another level. That helped me out tremendously. When we got to the basketball court, I was always feeling pretty confident in my game. And throughout the summer pickup games, I was, pretty competitive, had days where I might have been the best player out there. But when we got into putting the installs in the system and you're running what Coach Godfrey was running, which was his UCLA high post offense, which requires a lot of experience to understand where the positions are and how to take advantage of it, I was matched up against Chuck Davis, who was all SEC player, the starting big on that team that goes to the Elite Eight. And that's where my learning curve started, right there. It's, you're playing against a senior who's similar in size and strength. And it took me a time to try to figure out how to be impactful against an opposition like that. And it carried on into the start of the season. I mean, I started to end up to catch my rhythm. And as you mentioned, I kind of was able to stay with what I was able to do as far as post averaging a double-double on the season. But I think the main thing that allowed me to get on the court on that team was the fact, because we had a lot of good bigs with Chuck Davis and Jamario. So I did not start. I'm a McDonald's All-American and top 5 recruit, but I did not start on opening day at Alabama. And it was about 9 games in before I cracked the starting lineup. But it was an adjustment to come off the bench and still be impactful in that role. But I think my rebounding ability was something that could not deny me from being on the court. And I was able to come on and be be a force with that.
All right, going ahead to your sophomore year, 06, 07, you had the best overall record of your 3 years there at 20 and 12, but you didn't make the NCAA tournament. As I mentioned, we had Mark on a few weeks ago, and he admitted that your non-conference schedule was not what it should have been. Y'all finished, like I said, 20 and 12, 7 and 9 in the SEC. You lost to UMass in the first round of the NIT. You led Alabama in scoring at 14.6 points a game and rebounding at 8.7 rebounds per game. You led the SEC in field goal percentage, 60% in SEC games, and you started all 32 games that sophomore year. Starters that season were you, Alonzo G., Mikael Riley, Ronald Steele, and Jamario. Top reserves for Brandon Hollinger and Demetrius Jemison. Any thoughts about that season, your sophomore year?
Well, I think going back to the freshman year, which we finished in the NCAA tournament, and we played UCLA, who went to the national championship game so closely, lost by 3 points or so. Ronald Steele misses a shot that could have potentially tied or won it in the final moments. We had a lot of confidence in that offseason. We were preseason number 7 in the country. We had everybody coming back. And, the injuries on that team, people just don't remember. The injuries of that team really hampered us a lot because, Ronald Steele was, for me, and I still to this day will feel that he was the best guard in the country in that time period when he was healthy. And his injuries that he had was something that took a toll on us. It was hard for us to make an adjustment without a player who was so talented and did so much for us. And I think we learned from our freshman year. We played a tough schedule and did not win a lot of the non-conference games. We picked it up in the SEC play and beat teams like Tennessee, who was top 10, and LSU and Florida. And those were games that really helped to get us into the NCAA tournament. But my sophomore year, we did not have a challenging non-conference schedule. And we got into SEC play. We were ranked number 4 in the country. We were 13 and 1, and we lost on the road at Arkansas by 20-something points.
Wow.
And that was just the beginning of you didn't know if that was how good you were, but we struggled throughout the season, and we actually came down to the last game of the year with a chance to still win the West at Mississippi State, and we lost. So it was a frustrating year from the expectations that people are picking you to win the conference. They're picking you to potentially go to a Final Four. And we believed it, but we had some untimely issues on the team, and that played a role in us. That was the challenge, to go from the 4th-ranked team in the league in the country, I believe in November or December, to actually being the 5th seed in our NIT region. That was hard to swallow,
Yeah.
And very hard for a guy like myself who's competitive, wants to win, and, is trying to, play the right way. But it happens sometimes. Our guys gave a good fight. It just was one of those things, and sometimes that's just how it goes.
Well, optimism was high also going into the 07-08 season. But for whatever reason, the team just didn't gel, had no postseason opportunities. And I believe this was when Ronald Steele missed most of the season with knee injuries.
That was the year that he took a medical red shirt. Yes, correct.
Yeah, took a medical red shirt. Alabama finished 17 and 16, 5 and 11 in the SEC, including 0 and 8 on the road. I had no postseason tournament. You led Alabama in scoring with almost 18 points per game and in rebounds, 10 per game. So you averaged a double-double. You made AP Honorable Mention All-American and AP and Coaches First Team All-SEC. Starters that season were you, Mikael Riley, Alonzo G., Rico Pickett, and Demetrius Jemison. First 2 off the bench were Brandon Hollinger and Scenario Hillman. Any thoughts about that season before we get into the infamous SEC tournament in Atlanta?
Listen, I loved my time there. I learned a lot as a basketball player, but, winning is what you want to do. You choose to go to a school, to be a part of March Madness, to have a legacy. Every athlete wants to be remembered forever. That's what you're playing for. You're playing to have that type of impact. And it was extremely frustrating for me to have that situation where we just did not reach any of the expectations that I had for myself as a team. And I'm sure that in us, the coaching staff and the fan base, it played a role in me after 3 years. I graduated in 3 years even to make the decision to just go ahead and go pro because it was just that challenging and frustrating to deal with. And as a player, you know, you only feel like you can do but so much. You try your best, and I look back on it, it's definitely true that, you know, you can only do so much from a player standpoint, one individual. And we had talented teams. Sometimes things just don't click the way that they need to click. But it's one of those things that I wish that I could have a do-over on the collegiate career on that aspect and see if we could rally something because we had the talent. We had a good coaching staff that cared. You know, it was just for some reason, some things just were not able to be the way that we all wish they could have been. But nonetheless, sometimes that's how it goes that way and you learn from it. And it's been able to help me out moving forward in life to not take advantage or not take for granted any opportunities that you have to be on a team and to win games. And I think professionally, that experience helped me out tremendously.
Well, for those who don't remember 2008 SEC tournament in the Georgia Dome in Atlanta, during the quarterfinal game between Alabama and Mississippi State on Friday night, Mikael Riley hit a desperation three-pointer at the buzzer to send the game into overtime, and about halfway into overtime, a tornado hit the Georgia Dome at 9:40 p.m. Eastern Time, tearing open a hole in the roof, a panel in the roof, and sending insulation floating down and debris to the floor. And for those of you who remember, everyone started scrambling. Now, I was in the stands then, and my son, John Michael, was a ball boy, not in that game, but had been in the ball boy in the game before. And, of course, when everybody started panicking and scrambling, the teams were sent off the court, and I went hunting for my son to make sure he was okay. But the ball boys were back in a room, kind of a lounge area. It doesn't sound right for ball boys to be in a lounge area, but there was a area that they hung out, and we got him. And, of course, they canceled or postponed the Georgia-Kentucky game that was to be played late, even after our game. And then SEC officials gathered for a couple of hours and to explore all the options. And from that meeting came their decision to finish the tournament at Georgia Tech's arena. And that game was played on Saturday morning, and then Georgia won. And then they had to come back that night and play the semifinal game against Mississippi State, which they won. And then they beat Arkansas in the championship game on Sunday, and they limped into the NCAA tournament with a 17-16 record. They went into the SEC tournament 13-16, ended up with a 17-16 record. And I remember after that, our game that finally ended when they brought the teams back after about an hour delay, we walked back to the Marriott in Atlanta, and there was debris everywhere, shattered glass everywhere. I mean, it was unbelievable. So surreal to see that. You were on the court. You were a player. Go through that process of what you heard, what happened, what you saw. Just tell us about that.
Well, first off, I know I was focused because I was hoping that we could make a run like Georgia did and run off 4 games to be a champion. I still had faith until the last moment of that season. I promise you. I really did. I said we can try to win this. When we won the first game against Florida, I was hoping we could get it done. But we're playing Mississippi State for the 3rd time. It's the toughest time. You know, you're hoping you can finally beat them. But we're in overtime. And I can remember I'll run down and I'm in the post, so I'm looking towards, looking at the rest of the floor. My back's to the basket. And Brandon Hollinger's bringing the ball up the court. And I start seeing all the banners in the rafters just start kind of swaying. And I'm hearing a rattling noise. And we're just kind of looking around. Everybody just stopped. And we all just kind of look around. And the defense stops and kind of looks. The referees look. And I tell Brandon, I said, go, because I'm trying to win the game.
Yeah, right.
But they blew the whistle and they stopped the play, and we didn't know. And then people started coming down. And initially, it's like one of my teammates, Demetrius Jimison, said, and I agreed with him, He said, I thought it was all those Kentucky fans coming in making all the noise. That's what we really thought it was. Is just thought it was just some noise being made by the fans. But then we all kind of ran off the court. They got us off the court and we went into the back, but we had no clue what was going on. I mean, it's a couple of minutes left in the game, and then you start thinking about your parents and family that's out in the Georgia Dome and what's going on and if they're safe and if phones are working. And then you kind of reset and you start thinking, well, it's like 2 minutes to go in the game, and now you've cooled off. You're sitting back there. You don't know when you're going to start back, what's going to happen. You quite naturally almost forget the foul situation. So if you forget about what's going on in the game at the moment. And I really don't even remember too much of like the adjustments being made because we were just sitting back there waiting, and then we tried to regroup and went out and played, and we weren't able to come up with that win. But that was a crazy moment. And, it's something that whoever the writer was that wrote the article that realized later on that when Mikal hit that shot, had he not hit the shot to send the game into overtime, that means thousands of people would have been outside in that storm when it hit.
Right.
So he saved a lot of people's lives. He was a clutch player. He was always hitting shots in the big moments. I mean, he still plays professionally, so I'm sure he's still doing it. So it's just something that it's remarkable. But it's not only that. Played in a game that was hit by a tornado. My freshman year in the NCAA tournament, we had a bomb threat at San Diego State where we had to wait like 2 hours. My time in Alabama, man, I mean, it was just something. It was always something, trying to impact the game. And, and it's just a time period that people don't really remember either. I think a lot of the credit comes to like now with the exposure of the SEC Network and ESPN, you see more of these games. At that time, the footage wasn't the highest quality when you were watching those games, and people tend to forget those moments. But I remember them clearly.
Wow. Well, that's, Richard, it's crazy to think about. I mean, I listened to you say that, and you might ought to have a banner up behind you that you're like part of the all trauma team, honestly, for all the stuff that you guys went through. But, you talked a little bit about your decision to forego your senior season and to go ahead and make yourself eligible for the draft. As a young guy who is weighing that decision out, what is that process like, and what were the things that went into you making that decision?
Oh, that was extremely tough. That was one of the toughest decisions that I ever had in my life, because I always told myself, like, when you're a player and you know that it's like you only have one shot at the NBA in the NBA draft, you see all of these guys who decide to come back to college and then an injury happens or they don't play well and then their draft stock goes down. And you always tell yourself, trying to be proactive about it, that'll never happen to me. If I'm hot, I'm leaving. And I knew I had a good season. Didn't have the success that I wanted to have as far as the team was concerned in winning. And I went to Alabama. I wanted to win. I wanted to have a legacy. And I felt as if I would have stayed for another year, then I would have been a player that if you would have looked at, if a person was to look at statistical categories, I would have been amongst the top to ever play there. And I think it would have been justified with how you look at, your high school career and what you do for the state, going to the state school and hoping to win some games. And you can have a little bit of a legacy. It was a hard decision for me to make that decision to say that I was going to leave. But at the same time, it was easier because I did graduate in 3 years. As you mentioned, education was something that was stressed in my household. I went down to Tuscaloosa in summer of 2005, and I never went home. I took every summer school session, every interim session. I was, people don't remember, I was an academic all-SEC performer. So it wasn't just about the basketball for me. It was about being a better person. And I got that experience from the university and I enjoyed it. But the basketball, I felt that it was, if I was going to make a professional career and take a chance of getting drafted and hopefully be in the first round, then that was going to be the time that I was just going to have to take that chance. The thing that I hate today is that kids don't have to make that decision. You could have had the NIL opportunities, so it could have made it a little bit more enticing.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever the decisions, maybe get a little bit better feedback than you might get at those moments to make those decisions. I've always felt like the process of having to enter your name into the draft never made any sense to me.
Yeah.
The fact that you have to declare and you have to forego your eligibility and then wait for someone to call your name. And then if they don't, or you don't like the spot, you have no choice. It doesn't make sense. Never has made sense. I think they need to adopt the baseball model where they give you a phone call and ask you if you want that spot. And if you want it, then you have a little bit more control over that team and that position you get picked. Then it would have been much easier to make that decision. But that was the toughest decision I ever had to make to move forward into the draft. It also played a role with that as well.
Well, Richard, you were drafted by Golden State with the 49th overall pick. I played in the D-League and some summer leagues for a season or so. How was that experience? And we've talked about the transition between high school and college, but how was it between college and the NBA?
Well, the first part about it is the NBA draft. I mean, people think that the NBA draft should be one of the happiest moments of your life. And for some, it is. You look forward to hearing your name called, and it's flattering. That I can say forever that I was drafted to the NBA is something that very few people can say. So you're thankful for that. But that's a stressful situation. You talk about a 3-hour-long production, a television show, your whole life, you're playing basketball for, 20-something years of your life. All the work, all the games, all the training, all of the wins, whatever it is. And it boils down to just a 2.5, 3-hour-long show of when they call your name. And then as soon as it's over abruptly because of the number that you are affiliated with, or if you get undrafted, you immediately feel lesser than. And it's ridiculous because just 3 hours ago, you were one of the top players in the country.
That's right.
And now, 3 hours later, you're telling me there's a dozen other people or 15 more people over there that are drafted in front of you that just 3 hours ago were not considered better. So the league is something that it's a difficult thing. You'll always find out when people tell you, one person told me when I first got to the NBA, in this league, 2 + 2 never equals 4. And I found that out quickly. I was drafted 49th, second-round pick, which I was willing to accept, because I entered and I knew that there was a chance that I could fall that far. Didn't think I would fall that far, but it was what it was. I did sign a multi-year guaranteed deal with Golden State. I entered in there with some injuries because I got hurt in the pre-draft workout. And that impacted me going into training camp where I wasn't able to show what I could do, and playing for a veteran coach like Don Nelson, who doesn't really play young guys. That was a tough situation for me. I got my first action against Oklahoma City in a preseason game, and I had a double-double in like 20 minutes of playing time. So I can always say that I feel like, and on the court, that's Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook. I mean, all of the guys who were still playing today and in the league with me in that draft and around that time were on the court. So it wasn't like we were playing against second-team, third-team guys. I knew when I saw that I could do that, I knew I could play in that league. But I sat there for 2 months on the inactive in a sport coat, never got my name called. They sent me down to the D-League. I led the D-League in rebounds and double-doubles. My first professional game that I had 31 points in the Staples Center and 14 rebounds and hit 3 for 3 for threes. You can look it up.
Wow.
I mean, never got to shoot at Alabama, but they encouraged it. I was 3 for 3 in the Staples, so you can look it up. That was my rookie year, the first professional game I ever had. But it was always baffling to me that I never really got a better opportunity with Golden State, and something that I've always kind of hated. But it was a situation for me that, like anything, it was a lesson learned. Right. And in my second year professionally, I decided to go overseas, and ended up being the best decision that I could ever have professionally. I found myself being one of the top bigs in Europe for a long time. And it was a place where I felt like my game and I was appreciated and valued. And that's what it's about.
So, Richard, I want to spend some time talking about that, about your 12-year career in Europe, which is incredibly impressive. Tell us about some of the stops along the way and just, what are the highlights for you in that?
Yeah, well, I played 12 years, 13 years in total, and 12 years abroad, and in 7 or 8 different countries. So my first place I played in Spain, Israel, Italy, Russia, Turkey, France, and then I finished up in my last 2 years in Japan. I also spent some time playing in Macedonia as well. But, I competed at the highest level in the EuroLeague, and in my second year over there, I was one of the starters on a really good team in Maccabi Tel Aviv in Israel, and we actually competed for the EuroLeague championship. And it's some of the best basketball in the world. Most Americans don't know that it's some of the best basketball in the world, but all of the guys that you see internationally, they get their starts in the youth clubs of these. So when you see the players that come to the NBA, they're not even the better players on the teams overseas. They're in the youth clubs. So it was a great experience for me, and I was able to have a long career and probably got to see 50 plus different countries on my travels. Mm-hmm. So never in my wildest dreams, a kid from Athens, Alabama would have ever thought that that's what I would be doing. Now, I did have dreams to play in the NBA, and I was there for a short amount of time, for a few months. But the experience that I got abroad, that's priceless, and I wouldn't trade that for anything. I loved it. It shaped me into a better person, a better player, and it changed my whole mindset about life.
Well, Richard, it's interesting. So part of my background, I work in international orphan care, international adoption, have adopted 3 kids from Ukraine. We spent a lot of time in a lot of places around the world. And one of the things that I found through all that was EuroLeague basketball. So when you say that resonates with me, because the quality of basketball that's being played in the EuroLeague is incredible. And to have had some of those month or 2 month long stints during basketball season when I've gotten to see a lot of ball over there. I wish folks could have seen the environment that you competed in, because it's world-class basketball. I do want to press in on one part of the story though. So Lifeline Children's Services that I work with, we have the only American adoption program in North Macedonia. And so I'm a little familiar with North Macedonia, and a little birdie told me that you were naturalized as a Macedonian. Is that correct?
That's correct.
To be able to play on their national team in some EuroLeague tournaments.
That is correct. Well, in the FIBA sanctioned international tournaments, and you'll see oftentimes you will see Americans that will go over and they will acquire dual citizenship in other countries. And I do actually have citizenship in North Macedonia. It was Macedonia when I got it, but they had a change in their politics, and now they're referred as North Macedonia. But I spent 2 summers, I believe. 2 summers. I played in the 2015 Eurobasket representing Macedonia. I played again in 2016 in some qualifying tournaments. Might have played in 2017 as well, but I played a few summers over there. I mean, Skopje is a beautiful place.
Yeah.
I mean, it gave me an opportunity to play against, competition that I might not ever get a chance to play. We had an opportunity to almost compete for the Olympic, and we didn't qualify. Mm-hmm. But, it was a cool experience, and it was basketball. You see, it's a global game, and they allow you to do it. So it was a good experience for me.
Well, so we have to ask in all that, like food, cultures, those kinds of things, what were some of the things that you got to do as a result of the game carrying you to Europe that are some of those things that you kind of brought away and said, man, I've added that to who Richard is?
Well, listen, there's a lot that you got to know about when you go abroad. Like, you're not on a military base, like where there's Americans everywhere. My first place I go is to Granada, Spain. So it was a wake-up call for me. I go over and I have to learn how to drive a stick-shift car. You have to learn how to speak the language because they don't speak any English. Simple things like going to the grocery store and just, getting groceries it's the only thing you can do on your day off. It's like it takes all of your brain power to get that done. Something that people just take for granted here in America. I'm just going to drop by and do this. Those type of things are a real challenge. Couldn't find a barber. So you got to figure out how to cut your own hair and do certain things of that nature. So there's a lot of things that are just challenging and that are just different. The housing size, the things in the apartments that you live, the taste of the food. And you have to figure out a way to make yourself comfortable. And I learned a lot of skills when I was abroad. Obviously, you have some time on your own. You learn how to become a pretty good cook. You learn how to figure things out in society because you can't speak the language as well. You learn another language, and more so than anything, you embrace another culture. And that made me a better person, and it allowed me to be flexible in all of the places that I was able to go. Now, some places that you'll play in will be more similar to what you are like in America. Israel, I played there for 3 years for the top team. And that was one place where things were very simple. Japan, in my last 2 years of playing, was a cool experience. Talk about an organized place where people are so kind and neat. Everything is in sync and on time and respectful. So you learn some things everywhere you go, even in some places where some stuff is not, of a positive. You learn in those experiences as well. But at the end of the day, the biggest thing that I learned is when you get into the news and you see all of the geopolitical issues that take place, at the end of the day, everybody is pretty much the same. They're just trying to work a job, make a little money, take care of their family, and hopefully have a little bit left over where they can take a trip with their family and enjoy some good things in life. And when you have that type of mentality and respect everyone in that, I mean, you really see the world as a beautiful place. And I would not have ever had that experience if it wasn't for my times abroad.
Richard, before we get into your TV career, did you ever run into Trevor Relford over there? And he told us the same story about having to learn how to drive a stick shift. And he couldn't do it. He'd never been in a stick shift before.
No, I never played against Trevor while I was over there. And, it's interesting you asked that. Like, so many people always ask, when you know someone that plays overseas, like they always say, hey, I got a cousin or a friend that's overseas. Did you play against him? And I'm like, listen, overseas is not one league, is what I would tell everybody. Like I've had people, they'll say, I'm playing in Spain. They'll say, well, I got a cousin playing. Where's he playing? He's in Argentina. Do you play against him? Like, dude, do you know that's on the other side of the world? So you very rarely in the EuroLeague competition might be the only way that you're going to do it, because how it works is like this. It's like, there's levels to it. It's just like college basketball. Like you might have the SEC, might be the Premier League, and then there's some other conference that's a lower tier league. It's still Division I, but it's not the same level. And what you have is like conference play in non-conference play. You're going to have some marquee matchups. That's the EuroLeague, and that's going to happen in the midweek. You're going to have 24 of the top teams. Now it's 30 of the top teams in all of Europe. They're going to play a game midweek on Wednesday or Thursday against each other. So on a Wednesday, we might be in Barcelona. Next Wednesday, we might be in Milan. The next Wednesday, we might be in Moscow. We might be in Tel Aviv. And those 20, 30 teams play against each other on the midweek games. But on the Saturday and Sunday games, you play in your domestic league. So now it would be like if Alabama played Duke on a Wednesday, now they come back and play LSU on a Sunday. They're going to play UCLA on a Wednesday. Now they're going to play Arkansas on a Sunday. And that's what it's like. But everybody is not playing in that midweek EuroLeague league. So with that explanation of it, I never really had too many guys from Alabama that I competed against. I played against Erwin Dudley one of my last years and one of his last years when we were both playing in Turkey. I would see Chuck Davis from time to time, but never matched up against him. Played against Ronald Steele often when we were in Israel, but as far as Alabama guys, I didn't, but I learned a lot from the older Alabama guys who came before me. Eddie Phillips was a guy that I spoke to before I went over to CB Granada, and he played several years in Spain, and people don't realize how good of a player and how much of a legend he is abroad because people don't follow it. But he played over there. Leon Douglas played for some really good teams, and it's the same level as the NBA. And the unfortunate thing that I would challenge to the fan base is to get to learn more about international sports, because you'll see a lot of players who are doing some really good things still professionally. And oftentimes we only look at what's going on in the NBA, but the reality is it's only 450 jobs in the NBA and 60 draft picks every single year. So your odds that you're probably going to be playing abroad are highly likely as opposed to having a long NBA career.
That's right.
Well, Richard, in 2023, all of a sudden we began seeing you on the SEC network and all the ESPN family of networks calling men's and women's games. Had you always wanted to be a broadcaster or an analyst, and how did all this come about?
Well, I've never been shy, and particularly in front of a microphone or a camera. I know that. I don't know. I mean, I don't mind talking. I've always loved the game. I've always watched the game. And the opportunity, you mentioned Trevor Relford. The opportunity came to me, I think, in 2021. He called me up randomly. I'd recently retired. I was just kind of piddling around at home with my kids, and he called me up and said, Richard, you think you can fill in and do some Alabama games on the call? And I said, yeah, this would be great. And he gave me a number to call to the university, and the first thing they asked me is, are you be willing to call women's games? And I've said, yeah, basketball is basketball. I loved it. I mean, that first year was really good for me, and people took notice. And the next year, I was able to get bumped up onto the SEC network, and now it's been 3.5 years into this, and I've enjoyed the transition, and it's been a smooth transition from playing. It keeps me involved. I got all the basketball out of my system. It still keeps my competitive and my basketball IQ juices flowing when it comes to trying to analyze the game. And I can only hope that I bring that same type of passion and understanding of what's going on tactically in the game to the viewer, so they can feel like they can learn a little bit more about the game when they listen to me on the call.
I think one of the things that, Richard, we really like, it's great to listen because you are always so well prepared, and that really makes it a joy to listen to. I joked earlier that I feel like you're in my living room, 2 or 3 nights a week during the season. But take us through what a typical week looks like as part of the SEC season. What do you, how far in advance do you know what your week is going to look like? Anything that you might want to give folks to give them a little bit of insight into what life looks like during the season?
Well, you typically find out your games, 3 to 4 to 5 weeks out of what games you're going to have coming up. And if I have 2 weeks or 2 games during the week, for me, I always find it best if I can catch their most recent game in the live broadcast. Mm-hmm. Of course, I will always go back and watch multiple games to watch the film. I will study the tendencies of players. I'll read up on the coaches and whatnot. But, I've been doing it for a while now. You start to kind of develop a little bit of a catalog yourself on the information just from so many games. But I always enjoy just watching the games live because you get a chance to really see something without knowing what the outcomes are going to be in the game, which that allows me to use my brain a little bit more to lock in on what do I think is going to be the important aspects and trends of the game. If you already know the box score, you already know who won, and you go back and watch the game, it's a little bit different than watching it live to see what type of adjustments and plays that coaches and players do in real time. So, it's a lot of preparation, but I enjoy it. It never feels like work, but it is work. But at the same time, anytime I'm in the gym, I'm just grateful to be there. But it's a joy. It's a joy. It's nothing better that I can say to do to be watching basketball and bringing that type of joy to everyone who's tuning in.
Any funny stories of life on the road or things that have happened to you on or off air during the?
Well, I'm a simple guy. I mean, like when I go on the road, I'm a simple dude. I go straight to the games. I'm in and out. I eat at the same couple of places that I go to. I mean, I'm not one of these guys. If you're trying to say, hey, where do I go and eat in this town? Don't ask Richard Hendrix. No. Like, I'm not your reference. I don't know. I keep it simple. Like I'm going to eat about the same thing every single time. But no, I mean, like, I guess one thing for me is that there's a lot of production lingo that takes place from people in the industry. And the main thing that I've really enjoyed about doing this is the fact that, like, I'm not a journalist. Now, I did get my degree in a communication school at Alabama, but I was a basketball player. And when you have so many people who grew up in the journalism space and the broadcast communication space, they have been great to me as far as helping to teach me what's going on in the business and how to be better at being an analyst and whatnot. But in the beginning, you always hear certain production lingo that people will say. I had one game one time, and the producer's in my ear, and he's telling me when I'm talking about something, he's saying rap. And I just keep talking, and I just going and going. He's like, rap. I'm going and going. I'm breaking it down. I'm like, he needs to do this. He needs to do that. And next thing you know, I see like my microphone shut off. And I said, hey, I didn't know what you said. You kept saying rap. So I was rapping. I just kept going. I didn't know that rap mean to cut it off, wrap it up. So I mean, like it's things like that you just don't know because it's just what they're doing. And I'm running my mouth just trying to break down the play, and they're yelling in my ear to rap, and I think they're cheering me on about what's going on. So it's just those type things that we all have a chuckle about every so often when things like that take place. It's always fun on this gig. I really enjoy it.
Awesome. Well, you do a great job.
Yeah, you
do a great job. Well, Richard, besides your network duties, we hear that you're a coach back home in Athens. Tell us about your family, what sports your kids are playing, and what sports you're helping coach.
We play every sport. Right now, it's baseball season. So, it's always something that I look forward to coaching the kids in youth sports. I coach them in basketball as well. So that you want to hear about travel. I mean, I'm getting off the road and I'm coming right into practices and games and organizing stuff. I have to watch more film because we record those games as well to break down how I can help some third graders be a little bit better on jump stopping. And, but it's a lot of fun. I enjoy it. I mean, I stay up late into the night watching little things like that on those videos about kindergarten girls and how they can,
Wow.
chest pass. But, it's so much fun that you can give some of your knowledge to the next generation. To me, that's what it's all about. I know that I would not have been where I was if it wasn't for someone else volunteering and offering up their time. And I don't think there's anything better than you can do to go out and try to help some kids to learn how to play the game with their skills, with their communication, with their teamwork, with their fair play, with their attitude and hustle, and hope that you can inspire them. I can't always say that I'm the best coach, but I only hope that every single time that I coach the kids in something that I'm not their last coach. That's, to me, the goal that I have and the passion that I have when I try to coach youth sports. I want the kids to keep playing the next year and find some positives in sports, because it's not only good for you from a competitive standpoint, it's great for your physical condition, your coordination, your communication skills, adversity, working with each other. And if it wasn't for athletics, athletics has played a large part into who I am, as well as academics. And I think that that's something that is for everybody. And I think more people should participate in athletics, particularly on the youth level.
Tell us about your family, Richard.
Well, I have 3 kids, that keep me busy. And always, like I said, we go around all the time following their activities. So we're constantly on the go, just like any other family that's growing in the middle of it, between school and ball and extracurricular activities, whatever it may be, dance, ballet, daddy-daughter dances that you'll have to attend and whatnot. I'm all here for it. I give it the same level of passion that I do that I did when I was on the court, maybe even more so. I mean, I realize, I'm blessed to be able to have a family and to try to impact and mold their life. I know you only get one shot. It's just like the game in the playoffs. It's win or go home. And, you want to hope that you give your children the best chance that they can have, and hopefully give them some memories that I know that, like I have from my upbringing, that definitely will be something that will help shape them and to be positive contributors to society as they mature.
Well, you're a good daddy, Richard. The one last question we wanted to ask, how special is the bond among former Alabama basketball players? Because Melvin Cheatham talked about the camaraderie they have with not just the guys he played with in the late 80s, early 90s, but all levels, and text messages and group texts and all that. But tell us about your love of Alabama and all the special bond you had when you were there.
Well, I've always felt like I was a historian of the game. I've always had a respect for people that have come before me. Just at a young age, I knew that I wouldn't be who I was if it wasn't for someone else blazing a trail. So one of the cool things that I have now as a job as an analyst on SEC Network and ESPN is that when I get to go on the road, I never know who I'm going to bump into who's now working in basketball as a coach or as a NBA executive or scout or whatnot. And I randomly bump into someone might bump into Alonzo G, who's working in the NBA, or Keith Askins on the road. I see Derek McKee last year, who was watching his son play. I go to a Kennesaw State game with Antoine Petway and Philip Pearson and Chuck Davis and Willie Watson all on the staff. And, it just brings a lot of joy to be able to go everywhere and you see that Alabama basketball players are doing well, doing things involved in the game, and we all seem to still have that bond. Now, I just always wish that, when you live in the shadows of football, oftentimes a strong program like Alabama basketball doesn't get the recognition that I truly think that it deserves, because it's always been a strong program. You go back to those guys you mentioned with T.R. Dunn and Wendell Hudson and Leon Douglas and everyone from that generation moving on into the 80s and Wimp Sanderson and the 90s and the 2000s, even to present day. It shows that it's like, man, this has always been a strong program. And it's always had a strong fan base of people who are proud to be for it. The only thing that this program has lacked is just the national championship or the Final Four to give it a level of validity amongst people nationally. But we've always known that Alabama has had great players and great coaches and players who have gone on and have really good careers athletically and everything else. So it's a lot of pride that I have. I always am grateful to be a part of that Alabama basketball family. And I hope that that type of brotherhood only strengthens, particularly in the time that they have right now where they're really doing something special on the national scene. You see the pride that all of us alum have and support that we have behind this team, but I hope that the younger generation can take the connection amongst each other to the next level, because at the end of the day, this is all you're going to have is your memories, and your memories are best with the people that you enjoyed the biggest moments with.
That's great. Rick?
Man, that's good stuff, Richard. And
Yeah.
I think as we wind up tonight, I just, I would want to say to you, you are one of those people that we feel that way about. And I think there's so many guys that we've watched over the years that have put their heart and soul into representing the University of Alabama. And you were a fun guy to watch play. You left it all out there on the court. You played the game the way it should be played, and you are somebody who has an incredible amount of respect from folks that have been following this program for a long time. And so, man, thanks for being who you are and bringing that to the University of Alabama.
Thank you. I mean, it's definitely been a pleasure and a privilege, to be able to do so. And, I never took for granted those opportunities to play wearing a Crimson jersey. I mean, I only hope that the next generation of guys that play at Alabama have that same passion and fight and understand that they're not just playing for themselves, but they're playing for their families, for a whole nation of supporters that are pulling for them.
That's right.
That's great. Well, thank you, Richard.
And as we wind up, we try to finish this thing the same way every time, and that's to give everybody a big, hearty Roll Tide. So let's go out on a good note, Richard. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide. Thank you, Richard.